Welcome to MMA on the Rocks. My name is Bill Welger. You are listening to episode 279 of the podcast. Unless you're joining me live on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube, if you want to catch the show live, subscribe on one of those platforms, turn on your notifications, and they'll do all the work of letting you know when the show is live, like right now. Today is Sunday, March 20th, and we are one day removed from UFC Fight Night 204, or UFC London, as it's been referred to. Heavyweights Tom Aspinall and Alexander Volkov in the main event. Before we get into that, some other things I want to tell you about my day. And by the way, I hope everybody had a safe and happy St. Patrick's Day. I hope you all celebrated responsibly. It's kind of funny that there's a holiday, that revolves around a nation that causes the entire world to want to drink beer and whiskey. It's kind of a cool phenomenon if you think about it. And I'll tell you guys a quick story about my Irish heritage. I am half Irish. If you couldn't tell by my pale skin and the red in my beard, I'll go ahead and tell you. My great-grandmother, all of my great-grandparents on that side actually immigrated here from Ireland on a rickety old boat, and I was lucky enough to meet my great-grandmother. She was still alive when I was a kid, and I got to hear some stories of her coming over here and what a rough trip it was and everything, and how the Irish were discriminated against at that point in time. But they were hard workers and built lives for themselves. And her daughter, my grandmother, used to play Irish folk music for me, and she used to play this group called the Irish Rovers. And she would play this album like over and over for me. When I was a kid. I remember it very vividly. She's no longer with us, as is my great-grandmother, obviously. But there was one song on that album. It was called The Orange and the Green, and it was kind of a parody about the religious turmoil in Ireland between the Northern Irish Protestants and the Southern Irish Catholics. The premise of the story is that it's a kid singing the song, and his father was Protestant or orange, and his mother was Catholic or green, and it would cause a lot of fighting within the family. And the climax of the song is his father's relatives come over and his mother's relatives come over, and they tried to keep everything calm, but it wound up being a big fight. And the protagonist of the song declares that I had to stay neutral, so I just started bashing everyone. So when I was a kid, from the age of, 3 or 4, when I had my first memories of hearing this song, she would put this album on, and I would ask my grandmother to put on the songs with all the fighting because I loved it, and it was a catchy tune. So check it out if you're into Irish folk music. But I guess the point of the story is to tell you that I haven't changed too much in in the 30 some odd years since then. I still am drawn to fighting. So that was just a quick little anecdote. I'm going to pour myself a drink here. I don't know if you guys caught on social media my recommendation for Irish whiskey. It doesn't have to be St. Patrick's Day to drink Irish whiskey. You can drink it anytime. Obviously, everybody reaches for the Guinness and Jameson, and that's all well and good. I like that stuff too. But if you want to step it up a notch, this is actually probably my favorite Irish whiskey. And the light is not doing me any favors here. And it is Green Spot. Obviously more expensive than your Jamesons and Tullamore Dew and things like that. And it's just a really nice, smooth Irish whiskey. Irish whiskey is nice because it's typically lower proof. It's typically around 80 proof or 40% alcohol, which is lower than most things you would find here in the States, and lower than a lot of Scotch as well. I'm not sure the reason for that, but it does, make a more mellow sip. So if you want to ease into drinking whiskey straight, Irish whiskey is a good place to start. But it has a lot of the classic Irish whiskey notes. It's got, those vanillas. It's got like the sweet shortbread cookie to it that Irish whiskeys are known for. Single pot stilled whiskey. You're not going to get too many like peaty or smoky Irish whiskeys. There are a few. Connemara is one of them that actually uses peat to smoke the barley before they distill. But for the most part, you're going to get a low proof, very smooth, very easy drinking whiskey. That's why a lot of people enjoy doing them as shots. I'm actually going to taste another Irish whiskey right here. This is Kilbrin. I don't believe I've ever had this before, but I just picked up this little shooter at the liquor store. So I figured I'd give you guys a live tasting here. You can see like the light color. They're not big on like barrel aging stuff. It's all typically pot distilled. They'll age it for a little bit. I don't think they even disclose like how long they distill it for. It's another 40% alcohol. The lowest you'll typically find with like American bourbons is like 86 proof. There might be a couple that are lower, but usually we're in the 90s with bourbon. And then you have your bottled and bond bourbons that are 100 proof. So the Irish whiskey's much lower. And I'm not sure what the reason is. If anybody does, feel free to let me know. Yeah. I mean, you can't go wrong with an Irish whiskey. They all have like a similar flavor profile. And Mark wants to know if Green Dot is even better than Proper 12. It's Green Spot, actually, Mark. I see you're not taking notes. And yeah, I would say it's better than Proper 12. Proper 12 is like I would equate it to like a Jameson. It's like a mid to low shelf Irish whiskey, and it's not bad for what it is. And same as this Kilburn, I would put this in the same category. It's got that sweetness, that vanilla to it. There's very little burn. A brand new whiskey drinker might get a little bit of burn off of this, but someone like myself who has, killed all this skin cells or whatever mucus, whatever lines my esophagus, it's all dead. There's no nerves there anymore. So, this is just like drinking iced tea to me without the sugar. All right. Before I get into the UFC, I don't know if you guys follow on social media or not, but I was kind of documenting my day a little bit. And for the first time, and I've been in the world of martial arts for a long time, I judged fights. It was for Vigilant MMA Combat Quest 18. It was here in Tampa. And the way this came about was, you guys know that the company that makes the merchandise for the show is a local company in Tampa as well called Team Reaper. They make our t-shirts, hoodies, and tank tops, which you can get on their website. And I'll put in the description link as always. And you can use the promo code MMA Rocks 10 to save yourself 10%. So this company makes the merchandise for my podcast. I know the owner. We communicate. And he also happens to sponsor a combat sports promotion in Tampa. So Vigilant MMA is a promotion company. The event they put on is Combat Quest, and they pretty much do everything, but in a cage. So there was Muay Thai, there was kickboxing, there was Sanshao, which is like kickboxing with judo throws. There was one jiu-jitsu match that they did in the cage, and there was some MMA fights. So one of my contacts from Team Reaper reached out to me and asked if I would be willing to judge fights, because he knows I have experience. I've been training a long time, and I'm a coach, and figured I would be a reasonable and fair person, which I took as a compliment that he thought of me and asked me to do it. And I was very excited to say yes. I have criticized judges quite a bit on this show in the past 6+ years. So I thought it only be fair that I put myself in their shoes and, see if it was more difficult than I thought. I will say, since these fights were all amateur, and the level of amateur is a lot higher than it was back when I started training. It's definitely there's definitely a lot cleaner technique. People have evolved more, and I have to say, the Combat Quest put on a great show. It was at a local bar in Tampa called the Dallas Bull, which is right near the Hard Rock Casino. And it's basically like a big dance hall that has a second floor, which became like the mezzanine level of the event. So they put a cage in the middle of the dance floor with chairs around it, VIP tables, and then people could also sit up in the balcony. I was sitting with my face maybe 1.5 feet away from the cage. I was sitting on a stool. There were 3 judges, and I had always envisioned, like, okay, 3 judges would sit at a table together. But the guy who runs the promotion didn't want the judges to have any contact with each other. He wanted 3 different perspectives. So we were each at a different point of the cage. So we each had a different view. You could see everything. You could see the whole cage, but yeah, he didn't want us talking to each other and influencing each other, which I thought made sense. We got together afterwards and kind of talked about it, and we were actually all on the same page for every fight except one. So there was only one split decision on the card, and it was a bit of a controversial one. I have to say, I have a lot more respect for judges now, because I've been training a long time. I know what I'm looking at, but especially at the amateur level, there are scrambles, and it's hard to tell who got the better of who. You're trying to remember like big things that happened at the beginning of the round. Like, was there a big takedown? Was there a knockdown? But then this other guy's landing more. So you're kind of doing these calculations on the fly. And then the referee comes over to take the scorecard like right as the round ends. So I got to I have to calculate that last round and add it up and just hand him the paper. And yeah, there was a lot of pressure because it's amateur fights. So all the people in the audience are there supporting somebody. So there could be a fight going on where one guy does something and the crowd goes nuts. But what I'm looking at is not that guy winning the fight. He just did something that excited all of his relatives, and maybe he had more people there. So trying to focus in on that and just be fair and non-biased and tune out the crowd, that was more difficult than I thought it would be. So I could imagine, doing it for the UFC, where there's like a hometown fighter, like there was many of them last night in London. So there was that aspect of it. And then I'm also hearing people in the crowd behind me who are talking and saying like, so-and-so is winning. And I didn't let any of that influence me, but there's just a lot of distractions. It's loud. I can hear the coaches cornering. And then I was sitting right near one of the corners, so I would hear the advice they were telling their fighters. And then, my brain is kind of thinking about whether the fighter was following the advice or not. And then realizing like, I got to be making sure I'm keeping track of the points and doing the mental math. It was a little bit more difficult than I thought it would be. But it was also my first time. Obviously I've judged a lot of fights from my couch while I'm drinking a lot of whiskey. It's real easy to do then. And I still stand by a lot of the really glaring errors in MMA judging that I've criticized. I'm not going to backtrack on any of that, but at least I can say now I've been in their shoes and I know, kind of what it feels like to do that, which I thought was a great experience. So I appreciate Team Reaper inviting me to do that. I appreciate Vigilant MMA having me to the show. And it was a fun experience. There were some actually really great fights. There were some on the prelims. There were some kids kickboxing fights. There were one set of kids was 12 years old, and those kids were just wailing on each other. They were wearing headgear, but man, that one was pretty brutal. The jiu-jitsu match I did not judge because it was a submission. Then there was one Sanshao fight, which I don't know if I've ever watched a Sanshao fight, but it was pretty easy to score because it was like watching Muay Thai. You can just add some throws. Mark wants to know how many bribes was I offered. The answer is none because nobody knew I was a judge. On my card, I just wrote judge number 1 and I put my name on it, but they don't read my name out. I'm just kind of sitting on a stool and there were all kinds of people sitting around the cage. There were cameramen and, tech guys and the guy who cleans the blood off the cage and everything like that. So nobody knew who I was. And even if they did, I don't think anybody's paying off an amateur MMA judge. I don't know. I can't even imagine what the price tag on something like that would be. And even if there were one, I would not accept it. I was determined to be absolutely fair. There were some pretty brutal knockouts. One of them was a Muay Thai fight. And it was a guy named Samuel Martin. First round, they called it a TKO, but he knocked the guy down 3 times, and the guy was toast after getting knocked down the second time. And then MMA fight in the co-main event that was actually like a really close back and forth fight. Dakota Trice was knocked out in the second round. Or is it Tice? Oh no, I'm looking at the main event. All right, Dakota Trice was knocked out brutally, collapsed right in front of where I was sitting. He just got caught with a big punch and went down, and he did not get up for I want to say like 4 minutes. Like, it was scary. He was laying on the mat, not moving. And yeah, it's rough to see. I think it was his mother was there, and she tried to get into the cage, and she was very concerned, obviously. He did eventually get up and was able to walk out of the cage and didn't have to be taken out on a stretcher or anything. Then the main event was 2 big heavyweights. It was for the heavyweight championship. And this was Tice. This was DJ Tice, who's the heavyweight champion, defended his title against Roy Simmons. The first round, they just kind of circled each other. There wasn't a whole lot going on. And then Tice shot for a takedown on Simmons and drove him to the cage right in front of where I was sitting. Now, again, my face is about 1.5 feet from the cage. I'm sitting right up against it. Like my legs are touching the edge of the cage, and I'm on a high stool. So my face is like right in there. And when these two giant bears barreled into the cage, I swear I thought it was going to tip over. I saw my life flash before my eyes. And when I opened my eyes, I had big burly man sweat all over me, which was uncomfortable and exciting at the same time. But yeah, the rest of the fight was the champ scoring takedowns and beating up Simmons on the ground. Wound up with a unanimous decision. So it was fun. It was a great promotion. I've been to a lot of amateur events, and I have to say it was pretty well organized. Like, you know, you had your little hiccups here and there, but for the most part, like, people were talking to each other on headsets, and they had cameramen on top of the cage. They had photographers up in the balcony. They had an announcer that was good. My buddy JR Ridge, one of my training partners, is one of the broadcasters for them. I didn't get to hear it because I was watching the fight live, not listening to the broadcast, but I'm sure he did a great job. You guys know JR. He's been a guest on this show, bare knuckle boxer, who I believe has another BKFC fight lined up in May. I would definitely do it again. It was a great experience. I thank Vigilant, Combat Quest, Team Reaper, and everyone involved for allowing me to do it, and hopefully inviting me back to do it again. It was a good time. All right, folks, let's talk about UFC Fight Night 204 from London. It was a good night for the British fighters for the most part. Let's see here. So let's start with the main event. So Tom Aspinall, once he kind of figured out the range of Volkov, which didn't take him long, and got the fight to the ground, he finished with a straight armbar, which is not a submission you typically see in MMA. It's kind of tough to get. You kind of have to get it in transition between a Kimura and an Americana. And it's just weird, especially because, you know, Volkov has such long arms. You would think it'd be difficult for Aspinall to get the right leverage. With such a long arm, but he was able to do it. Aspinall is impressive for sure. I mean, the dude is well-rounded. It seems like he's been training a long time. He's on a good run now. I mean, I can't remember anybody finishing Volkov in the first round. I can't remember Volkov being submitted. So correct me if I'm wrong. Let's see. He's got Aspinall now has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fights in a row. And this was a high pressure main event, you know, in his home country. And he was able to perform like this, submitting, you know, a top heavyweight like Volkov in the first round. So impressive. And I believe he called out Tai Tuivasa, and even Mark is saying he's worried about Mark Fellows, our Australian buddy, is saying he's worried about Aspinall facing Tuivasa. It'd be a fun fight. It'd be a really fun fight. I can't see. Man, I feel like Tuivasa would be hard to get to the ground. He's just so big. It would be interesting. It would be interesting. I wouldn't mind seeing that fight. Let's see. Co-main event. Arnold Allen, TKO over Dan Hooker. This was some of the most exciting couple minutes on the card. I mean, these two were just slinging bombs at each other, and then Dan Hooker just got the worst of it. Arnold Allen flipped a switch here. Usually a very patient, calculated fighter. Good ground game, good top pressure. Our friends over at Blast MMA. Shout out to Coach Bill Eastlick letting me know that Volkov has been submitted twice back in M1 Global. I remember that promotion, but that was back in 2009. So, all right. So he hasn't been submitted in like 11, 12 years. All right. Arnold Allen just flipped a switch and, took it out on Dan Hooker's face. Dan Hooker dropping back down to featherweight. I believe he had fought there early in his career. And then he moved to lightweight and he went on a run. And Dan Hooker's a big dude. I mean, he's 6 foot and he's not like, doesn't have a super small frame. Like, I wouldn't think 45 would be the best place for him. He looked very dehydrated during the weigh-in. And, of course, people are shitting on him right away and saying, like, well, he moved down a weight and he got knocked out. I'd say slow down with that kind of talk. I do think lightweight is the place for him. I don't think he'll ever fight for a championship or anything like that, but he is still a very good fighter. And if you look at his losses, they're only against top competition. So the brutal loss to Edson Barboza, which is one of the worst beatings I've ever seen in an MMA fight. I still wake up in my sleep sometimes yelling, "Stop the fight," because I'm having nightmares about that fight. But then, he went on a good run beating James Vick, Ally Quinta, and Paul Felder. Okay. And granted, the Paul Felder fight was a close decision. Then he loses to Dustin Poirier, who was the interim champion. He loses to Michael Chandler, who was a champion in Bellator and fought for the championship in the UFC. Then he still gets a win against Nasrat Haqparast after that. And then he lost to Islam Makhachev, which I think anybody who fights Islam Makhachev is going to want to leave the division because they know they're not going to be able to ever be champion while that guy's in their same division during their career. So he might as well be like, well, I'm not going to beat that guy, so I might as well suck myself dry and move down a weight class. And then we don't know how high the ceiling is on Arnold Allen. He's undefeated in the UFC, I believe. And I think this is the kind of fight. Yeah. So Arnold Allen has not lost in the UFC and he's been around since 2015. I feel like this is the kind of fight, co-main event, where he got the confidence boost he needs to reach his potential. So Dan Hooker only has losses to elite lightweights in the UFC. And he only has one loss at featherweight. And it's to a potentially elite featherweight. I mean, Arnold Allen is the real deal. He's well-rounded. He's got a submission game. He can knock you out. Now he's coming with confidence in his power. He called out Calvin Kattar. I love that fight. And yeah, I think it was fun. I think it's a fun fight. Kattar and Allen. Our friends at RC Fun Zone say that crazy thing about Barboza doing what he did to Hooker and then seeing him in his last fight against Bryce. Yeah. I mean, I think Barboza was just a different beast then. I think that was like 4 years ago, 2018, off the top of my head. I mean, I could easily pull it back up again with another click, but I'm not going to. So Mark wants to know where Arnold Allen is ranked now. Well, the new rankings won't be out until tomorrow or Tuesday, I believe. So we'll see. I mean, I imagine, Dan Hooker wasn't ranked at featherweight, but I imagine it's going to bolster him a good couple of steps. Oh, he's ranked number 7. So I guess they are out. Well, Mark, your sources are better than mine. Thank you for contributing. All right. Let's go on to probably the biggest needle mover on the card, Paddy Pimblett. This guy is interesting. They're calling him the funniest nickname I've heard for him is they call him the fifth Beatle because he's got that Beatles haircut, but he's blonde and like kind of like I don't know, like goofy, like cartoony looking. I think it's great. This guy is going to have problems at lightweight because his striking's still very raw and he gets hit. His thing is the ground. He won this fight against Rodrigo Vargas by a rear naked choke in the first round, but not without some drama. He got clocked pretty good. He got dropped in that first round. Mark Fellows says that Owen Hart is Paddy's father. That's pretty hilarious. Speaking of which, very tragic that the professional wrestler Scott Hall passed away recently. So I'll mention that. That was a big part of my youth. I was a big WWF fan back in the day, and I remember being a big fan of Razor Ramon, and I loved Scott Hall in the Resurrecting Jake the Snake documentary. If you guys were a fan of pro wrestling as kids, definitely go watch the Resurrection of Jake the Snake. It's just an excellent, like, winning story of a guy who was so down in the dumps, alcoholic and drug addict and overweight, out of shape. His kids weren't talking to him. And then he starts doing yoga with Diamond Dallas Page and completely turns his life around and, gets to actually even train in wrestling again. And Scott Hall was kind of a sub character of that documentary. So definitely very cool. So Paddy Pimblett, it's tough, man. Because what do you do with this guy? I imagine his next fight has to be like a main event or a co-main event. But you look at he looks like he could have been one of the siblings in Home Alone. Like he could have been one of Macaulay Culkin's like younger brothers or something. Yeah, it's tough. Okay, so this is his second fight in the UFC and his second finish in the first round. The kid's good. He's got skills and he's tough as hell. But his next fight is going to have to be probably a co-main event. At least I would think, right? I don't know. I don't know what you give him, because if you give him someone like Terrence McKinney would be a great fight, I think. But then at the same time, you might want to keep those two away from each other. Because you have two really big potential stars there. He got into the altercation with Topuria. I think they're going to keep Topuria away from him for sure. Even though they have like a personal beef because Paddy like threw a bottle of hand sanitizer at him or something. Yeah. Interesting. There's definitely still a lot of holes in his striking. He fights with his chin straight up. And he's a little raw on the feet. I was watching some of the clips of him hitting pads in the back, and there were just like some very rudimentary things that were off with it. And when you start getting into even the top 20 of this lightweight division, look at a guy like Bobby Green, who Bobby Green is ranked like what, number 20 or something, but Bobby Green throws straight punches right down the pipe. And that's the worst thing for a guy who comes in throwing looping shots with his chin straight up in the air. But maybe, you build him up, give him some other grapplers and hope he fills in the gaps. because I don't, it's going to be a tough go for him at the top of the division, which, you know, I'm not saying give him a top 10 opponent, but, you know, he was the third fight on this card in London. He's calling for the UFC to go to Liverpool, where he's from, which, by the way, when they cut to Paddy's corner and they were giving him advice, I couldn't understand a fucking thing those guys were saying. That Scouser accent is a rough one. It's like somebody put British, Irish, and Scottish accents in a washing machine, and like you just like whatever comes out is some combination of the three that's like not really easy to understand. So let's see. Our friends at Blast MMA saying he's not at the top of the division. No, he's definitely not, but he's got more marketability than most of the division. So he was already, you know, just before the co-main event on this card. So I imagine, and he got the biggest pop of the night. So I would imagine if they do a card in Liverpool, he's going to have to be at least the co-main event. Let's see. All right. Scouser accent. We went over that. Gunnar Nelson made his return, who's always been a fun fighter to watch, in my opinion. Just very unorthodox. He's got that kind of like bouncing karate stance. And he's also like a really good grappler. And this was a tough fight. You know, if you've had I think it was a 2-year layoff or whatever it was, coming back against Takashi Soto is no easy task. And he looked great. You know, he basically shut down Soto on the feet and then spent most of the rounds on his back, with a tight looking body triangle, and just beat the shit out of him. It was just hammer fists and, you know, looks like very uncomfortable positions, and wasn't able to get the rear naked choke because Sato's defense stayed really tight. But, you know, he wasn't able to escape the position either. And what I thought was interesting, and what I thought was going to be the demise of Gunnar Nelson, was he was leaping forward with a rear hook that he would kind of turn into like a slap collar tie. And he was trying to use that to get into the clinch. And usually when you go for a collar tie, you go with your lead hand, or you switch stances if you're going to use your rear hand. But he was just leaping forward with the rear hand and grabbing the back of the neck. And sometimes he was throwing it as a hook, and sometimes he was grabbing for the collar tie. Very unusual. And since Sato is a southpaw, just a straight jab would have put an end to that. But I guess Gunnar was timing it in such a way that Sato wasn't able to counter it. He was able to just keep doing it over and over. So I was watching that thinking like, man, if he keeps doing that, he's going to get stuck with a jab. But he never did. It never happened. So what do I know? Enough to be a judge, I'll tell you that much. And I know I like Irish whiskey. So those are two things I know. Beyond that, who knows? Let's see. Molly McCann, another Scouser. I don't know if it's polite to call a female a Scouser or not, but, you know, she's from that area of the world as well. Teammates with Paddy Pimblett, I believe. Came out wild in this first round against Luana Carolina. I thought she was going to gas herself out. And it looked like Carolina wanted out in that first round. It looked like she was looking for a way out. But to her credit, she got back in the fight, and she was never really at a point where she was winning the fight. But, you know, she hung in there. Like, she stayed tough until the third round when she ran into a spinning back elbow, which, tell me if anybody saw that coming, because I was watching the fight and I was like, what was that shot that did that. I had to see the replay to actually see there was a spinning back elbow. And man, that place erupted. That was a wild, wild knockout. You typically don't see females get knocked out cold like that. So a great performance by Molly McCann. And, she's got to be on top of the world right now because a finish like that in front of her home country crowd. Usually it works the opposite way. If you're fighting in your hometown, it's stressful because people are asking you for tickets and like sending you messages all the time. And then you're worried because 50 people in the crowd and they're all there to see you and you don't want to disappoint them. And like the stress weighs on you. But I don't know, for whatever reason, these British fighters, it works to their advantage, apparently, as it did for a lot of the folks on the London card last night. Unfortunately, it didn't work out for Jai Herbert, who got knocked out by Ilya Topuria in the second round. And Herbert, I thought, won the first round, and Topuria had to come back a little bit. And it was just a beautiful sequence from Topuria that finished the fight. It was a head, body, head sequence, but before he threw the right to the head, he kind of ducked down like he was going to go to the body. And Herbert, if you notice, bit on the feint and dropped his hands. So when Topuria came with the overhand, that landed. And then he went to the body. And then he went back to the head. And that was what dropped him and just put him out cold. But it was a great fight up to that point. So, yeah. I'm sure Paddy didn't want to see Topuria win in such a way. And it was a huge knockout, but I still don't think the UFC is going to make that fight. I think they have different trajectories for each of these guys. Maybe they'll meet at some point down the line. I don't even know what the problem was between these two guys. Like what started it, why Paddy threw sanitizer at him. And it's just interesting that, people are able to throw sanitizer now, because 2 years ago, that would be like, throwing a stack of $100 bills. That was a hot commodity in early 2020. Let me see. Catch up on some comments here. Bruce Palmtrotter says, Dan Hooker is almost as good at getting murdered as actual hookers. Agreed. And the agreed is part of the comment. He's asking a question. I'm not going to agree with that, but I am going to acknowledge that it's funny. So that's a good one, Bruce. Let's see. Mark Fellows says, close to the best female KO of all time. Shevchenko versus I comes to mind. Holly Holm versus Ronda Rousey. I would say Amanda Nunes against Cyborg is one of the most impressive knockouts to me. And let's see. Okay, Mark is telling me that Paddy tweeted a political war thing against Georgians. Ooh. All right, I'm not going to touch that one. Not going to touch that one. Oh, yeah, Blast MMA. Rose Namajunas versus Wiley Zhang. That was another good one. Yeah, there's been some good ones. The Holly Holm over Ronda Rousey was that one was gruesome, especially because like nobody thought that was going to go down like that. Ronda Rousey seemed indestructible at that time. And the fact that she was able to just have a highlight reel KO like that when she hadn't been finishing people in the UFC up to that point. So like everything surrounding that fight made that such an incredible knockout. Yeah, but thanks for all those contributions and taking me down memory lane here for the women's MMA. Makwana Murakami submits Mike Grundy in 57 seconds. So this this fight, two really good grapplers. Mike Grundy shoots in for the takedown first, leaves his neck in a little bit too long, and Amir Khani just from that front headlock position, from that guillotine position, he transitions to different chokes so well, and was actually able to put Grundy to sleep with the anaconda choke that it wound up being. But he was just kind of transitioning from arm guillotine to darce and anaconda choke and just kind of weaving back and forth. I think like Popeye dancing, just going in and out, transitioning between those different arm positions. Let's see. So there was that. I mean, Mirkani was coming off of, I believe, a 3-fight losing streak, and Mike Grundy had lost 2 in a row. So Mirkani thought that he was fighting for his job, and pretty sure he kept it. Let's see. For the sake of time, I'll kind of breeze over the rest of this. Sergey Pavlovich with a TKO over Shamil Abdurakhimov. These two former training partners, and I guess Pavlovich left the camp and took his boxing coach with him. But these guys didn't seem like they hated each other or anything. It wasn't like a heated fight. They were both kind of tentative because they knew each other. But then Pavlovich, man, he's just got crazy power. Although I do think that Abdurakhimov was covering up a lot, and right when the TKO was announced by the referee, he stood up right away. I don't think it was a terrible stoppage, but it probably could have gone on a little bit longer. I'm not going to be too critical anymore until I actually, strap up the black Nikes and get in there and referee a fight myself. Maybe that's the next thing I need to do. I was actually thinking about that today while watching this card and judging it for Vigilant MMA. Maybe I should see about refereeing a fight, at least like a smoker or something, like something with not a lot on the line, just to get in there and see what it feels like. Cause I've always kind of wondered, maybe I should just grab like some of my intro students and just make them fight and like pretend to referee it. Then I could say I'm experienced at that too. In any case, Pavlovich coming away with the first round TKO. Paul Craig, another first round submission over a really tough Nikita Krylov. Locked up a triangle on him. What can you say about Paul Craig, man? This guy, he's another guy who I feel like just at some point it clicked and he got a confidence boost. His last big loss was the knockout loss to Alonzo Menafield, and he was able to bounce back. And since then, he has had 1, 2, 3 submission finishes, 4 if you count submission to punches against in the rematch with Shogun. And then I guess it was a technical submission over Jamal Hill too when he broke his arm. Just a crazy run since that knockout loss in 2019. And he had the draw with Shogun, but that was like kind of bullshit. And he tapped him out with punches in the rematch. So yeah, man, Paul Craig is a problem at 205. The guy's got super slick submissions. Like, who wants to get in there with a guy that's breaking dudes' arms at this weight? Because a lot of the light heavyweights and heavyweights, they're typically not like technically sound with the submissions. They're usually, have a couple in their back pocket that they can kind of muscle, but like real jiu-jitsu technique, you're really thinning the herd when you get into those higher weight classes. Light heavyweight, I could probably name you all of the best submission artists ever. I mean, there was Fabricio Verdum, there was Frank Mir, there was Nogueira, Fedor, and then it gets a little murky after that. So yeah. Jack Shore, unanimous decision over Timur Valiev. Another local guy coming away with the victory. Elise Reed, split decision, the only split decision on the card over Corey McKenna. And Mohamed Makayev submits Cody Durden in the first round, 58 seconds of the first round with a guillotine. What was cool about the bonuses for this card, I don't know if you guys are aware, every finish on the card got a $50,000 bonus, because I was wondering, this is one of the only times I actually looked it up before recording the podcast. Usually I'm going over the results and like, oh, I hope this guy got a bonus, or I hope this girl got a bonus, not knowing who got them. So I decided, why don't I actually have a little bit of journalistic integrity here and look up the information before going live to the internet to all you fine folks. And yeah, it turns out the UFC gave $50,000 bonus to every finish on the card, which was 9 finishes. If you're trying to do the math in your head, that's $450,000. Pretty close to $500,000 given out in bonuses, which by far set a UFC record. Hopefully sets a new precedence or motivates fighters to, get out there and put on shows like this. I think it's great. Of course, you're going to get people on the other side not saying it's great and saying like, well, obviously they can afford to do this every time. And, they need to be paying every fighter $50,000 more. It's like, all right, well, once you've ever given somebody $50,000 out of your pocket, I think you're qualified to make that criticism. But until you've done that, let's say you're not. And that will not be an experiment that I'll be doing. I'm not going to give anybody $50,000 just so I can judge, the UFC bonuses. Let's see. Mark says, thank God you researched it. I can take a rest for once. Mark Fellows is like my young Jamie. Sometimes I just put questions out there into the universe, knowing that he's going to come up with an answer. And maybe I use that as a crutch sometimes. And other times I use Green Spot as a crutch. By the way, those of you who are asking about the audio version of the episode from last week that I recorded in Orlando, to be honest, I may have drank a little too much and I was just exhausted and realized I was falling asleep at the end of the episode. So I did you all a favor and I did not post the audio from that. So if you missed last week's show, the only place it exists is on YouTube. If you want to see me embarrass myself and basically fall asleep on a live podcast, that's where you can see that on YouTube. While you're there, make sure you subscribe and turn on your notifications so you can join us live, because you can see how much fun we're having with all the comments and questions tonight. So you should join in on that fun and subscribe. And I'm really sick of these ads on SureDog, and I keep forgetting to use a different site. I'm a creature of habit, so I'm just used to pulling it up as I go here. All right, so next week, UFC is in Columbus, Ohio. UFC on ESPN 33. It's so hard to keep track. We're on like UFC Vegas 40, UFC Fight Night 204, UFC on ESPN 33. I wish they would just like number them one way, like the pay-per-views and everything. Like let's just do this all sequentially. Let's see here. Fun heavyweight main event. Curtis Blades, Chris Daukaus. Curtis Blades is one of these guys that, like, man, at any given point, he probably could have been the best heavyweight. And then he had like 2 kind of freak losses to the champ and Ngannou, and they're probably never going to let him fight him again. So, but Daukaus, I feel like he's having a quick turnaround here. Yeah, he just had the knockout loss to Derek Lewis in December. But before that was on a pretty good run. Parker Porter, Alexei Olenek, Shamil Abdurakhimov, and those were all knockout wins. Let's see. He got knocked out by Derek Lewis. We have not really seen Chris Daukaus's grappling tested yet in the UFC. And that's what we're going to see with Curtis Blades, who is probably by far the best wrestler in the heavyweight division. The guy's just a monster. He's relentless. He doesn't get tired. Let's see, what has he done lately? He's coming off of a win over Rosenstrike and also a knockout loss to Derek Lewis. That's right. Derek Lewis had that kind of short, like bowling punch. It's a fun main event. I don't really know how this one goes. Dawkins has good game plans. He's got good power. But how's he going to deal with the wrestling, and how's he going to deal with coming off of that nasty knockout loss to Derek Lewis, who is the knockout king of the UFC record books? This is never not going to throw me off. Joanne Wood, formerly Joanne Calderwood. So if you're not aware, she got married to a guy with the last name Wood, and her maiden name is Calderwood. So it seemed like she was just, I don't know, being hip and dropping the first part of her surname, but not the case. She got married, and she's fighting Alexa Grasso in the co-main event. So that's a fun fight. I like that one. That's actually like a really good matchup there. And we got Askar Askarov and Kai Kara France. This has to be a number one contender fight for flyweight, right? I would think. This is a tough one, man. Askarov is like, he's like relentless pace with the grappling, and Kai Kara France is a relentless pace in general. These little guys throw down. Let's see. Matt Brown and Brian Barberena. How do you not love that fight? That's going to be a war. I feel like this one was supposed to happen recently, but one of these guys got COVID or an injury or something. Here's a fun one for me. This one might seem boring to a lot of people, but Ilir Latifi and Alexei Olenek. I'm a fan of both of these guys. Latifi, a national wrestling champion. Olenek with like 50 submissions or whatever it is on his record, can submit dudes from the bottom. And he's like pretty wild and reckless on the feet because he's not afraid of the fight going to the ground. So he'll just throw whatever. And if it ends up on the ground, he's like, well, great. That's what I wanted anyway. So yeah, that's an interesting one for me. I would think Latifi would want to keep that one standing because you don't want to be on top or underneath Olenek. 59-16-1 is Olenek's record. That's insane. All right. Jennifer Maya against Manon Fiora. I have nothing on that one. Neil Magny and Max Griffin. This is a fun fight, and I had no idea it was happening. Neil Magny is coming off of, he was on a main event 2 fights ago against Michael Chiesa, and then won his last fight against Jeff Neal, and now he's on the prelims. Man, who did Neil Magny piss off? Such a nice dude. Max Griffin, good technical striker, throws straight punches, makes very few mistakes on the feet. But Neil Magny is just so good everywhere. He's just like a little bit above average in each area. Let's see. Mark DeCasey against Vyacheslav Borshev. I do my best on that one, guys. I'm not familiar with this fighter. I don't know. Did I get that wrong? Vyacheslav Borshev? His nickname is Slava. Let's just go with that. Okay, so Dana White Contender Series fighter basically his last 4 fights, he's only got 7 fights, but his last 4 fights were all knockout wins. One was a submission to punches. Okay, this is a fun fight because Takashi is an explosive fighter, explosive striker, coming off of 2 losses in a row. That's a really fun fight, I think. Somebody's getting knocked out in that one. Sarah McCann against Carol Rosa. That's a fun one. Chris Gutierrez and Batjarel Dana. Man, these names are getting rough towards the end of this one. I better just quit while I'm ahead. And here's the rest of these fights. I'm not too familiar with a lot of these fighters, and I don't want to disrespect them by pronouncing their names wrong. So I'm just not going to. You guys can just Google the card and look it up and look at their records and all that stuff. And if you really want my opinion, you can DM me about it. All right, I think I covered everything. Irish whiskey, Scouser accents, my Irish heritage, me judging my first MMA / kickboxing / Sanshao / jiu-jitsu / Muay Thai card, which was a lot of fun. Thanks again, and shout out to Vigilant MMA, and another shout out to Team Reaper for thinking of me and inviting me to do that. It was a great experience. I really enjoyed it. Check out Vigilant MMA. They have a pretty cheap subscription-based platform on their website. If you want to watch some good amateur fights, it's a different experience than watching pro fights, and especially because you get so many different styles. So you get a kickboxing fight and then a grappling fight right after, and then an MMA fight. It's cool the way they set it up. And if you often find yourself over the top or under the influence or both, then grab some merchandise from our friends over at Team Reaper. Reaper1.co is the website. As always, I'll put the link in the description wherever you happen to be consuming the podcast. Thank you all for listening. As a thank you, I'll give you my promo code MMA Rocks 10 to use at Team Reaper's website. That's MMA ROCKS 10. Save 10% on your whole order, whether it's my merchandise or not. Let's see. Mark says he'll subscribe if I judge, ref, and commentate the same night. Like, not the same fight, though. Like, ref one, judge one, and commentate on one. Fight commentary would be a fun thing. But I'm actually losing my voice just from being in that place and talking to people with all the loud music and everything. I could imagine if I was talking for the whole 4 hours without whiskey. I mean, whiskey is the only way I'm able to talk for an hour straight to you guys because it keeps my throat lubricated. Art Vandelay couldn't make it on the show this evening. He had a prior engagement, some kind of architect convention or some shit. Yeah, thanks everybody for coming and hanging out on the live show. It's always more fun when we get a lot of comments. Sorry I didn't keep up with them too well. I know I missed a bunch of them, but I'll go back and read them and I'll respond if they need responding to. So thanks for everybody for tuning in. Thanks to everybody who buys the merchandise from Team Reaper, and thanks to everybody who doesn't and who just listens to the show, shares the show, puts comments on the YouTube video, which helps out a lot, and all that stuff. Even the criticism, even the nasty comments from people, I enjoy it all. I'll have a drink and laugh about your nasty criticism. I'll find the humor in it. I'm not an easy guy to tick off. I got a pretty thick skin, I like to think. All right, well, that's that. If you guys want to get a hold of me, you know how to do it. It's on at MMA on the Rocks everywhere on social media. You can send me an email, MMAOnTheRocks@gmail.com. You can go to the website, MMAOnTheRocks.com. You can leave a comment through there. Somebody will check it, maybe. That's all I got for this week. Until next time, cheers, everybody. Goodbye. Wrong button.